So anyway, we've got these, by the end of the season, we have a record of everything that got planted in the field and the hoop houses on these maps, in rough, in pencil form, you know. And then I'll take those to the computer with me in December and take all that information from the rough copies and put it in the computer. And you know how easy it is to lose track of this stuff when you plant it? If you've got 5 varieties of gladiolas going in there, and man, wouldn't it be nice if you could remember what that nice color was so you could buy some more for next year? If you don't have the map in the truck sitting out by where the gladiolas are, you'll never remember, because little sticks get lost. I've had our neighbor's daughter, who was like 2 years old, I had marked everything with stakes, you know, with sticks in the ground, and I turned around and she had pulled every single one of them up. And hoop houses get their own maps, because this is really high real estate, high value real estate. So there we have, I happen to just name these hoop houses T, U, and T, and they have bed numbers, and they're 90 feet. Some of them are 3 feet wide, some of them are 4 feet wide. But that at the end of the year, I have a record of everything that got planted in those beds. Okay, so in addition to that map, we have another thing in the house called just the garden journal. And somebody is sitting down every night, right before supper generally, and writing down what happened that day. A lot of times even just who visited, but between this garden map and this daily record, if I miss something on the map, I can go back to the daily record and say, like, when did we plant those beans? I didn't get it on the map, you know. So on the garden journal, it's not so important to note exactly where it was planted, except if at least somebody says at least the beans were planted such and such. Usually it'll say carrots were planted in the I section. It doesn't have a bed number. I'll know. I'll go back to my map and I'll use that to cross-check my maps.
Are you doing something in code in the last one?
That was just to point out that if you don't write legibly in your journal, it's not any use. So we also have a journal. We have a little wooden box that is the greenhouse box. The greenhouse box is where we put the garden journal and usually a Johnny's catalog and the seeds and the labels and the pins that go up to the greenhouse from the house. And in that greenhouse journal, everything that got planted in the greenhouse goes onto a format, meaning the date, the item, how many flats were planted, what kind of flat it was. If it was 128, maybe we sowed 10 flats of 128 cell flats of Thai spinach. And then the abbreviation of the seed company and the year of the seed packet. So if we don't have that information, if we have bad germination on something, we can't track it down. So if it's like it came from Johnny's Selected Seeds and it was 2013 seed, it'll have a J13. On the back side, on the flip side, it'll have the date it was planted and the variety and the item on the front side. We just use tongue depressors. Mm-hmm. And because the greenhouse gets way complicated, and we really have to keep track of what happens in the greenhouse. So the next journal is a harvest journal. We didn't start doing this till about 5 years ago, the harvest journal. Part of it had to do with our organic records for our organic certification. We have to keep track of the total volume of crops, of each crop that we harvested on our vegetables. But it's also handy for us on the flowers because I have this record now on the harvest journal. I have been able to develop a whole flower production calendar that shows exactly the volume of peonies, snapdragons, everything that's coming off throughout the summer. So when a bride says, I'm going to have a wedding in 1st July, what are you going to have? I can look back on my records from last year on the spreadsheet and I'll tell her these 10 items that we had, you know, because it's pretty much going to be the same from year to year. But how do you get that information in that harvest journal? Well, we get it in there because, I'll show you in just a minute. All this stuff is coming in from the field with 5 or 6 different workers going up back and forth. There's all these trips back and forth to the barn, all this stuff. Each person has to be responsible for writing what they harvested in the field and put it on that whiteboard. So that whiteboard's hanging right on the cooler. So as stuff gets processed, it's washed and put in the boxes, or it's put in the buckets. As it gets put in, that person who's harvesting it has to write it on that whiteboard exactly how many buckets or how many pieces, how many cases that went in. And you can see that harvest journal hanging right there on a string with a pin. It can't lose any pages, and the pin can't come loose. And so every time that whiteboard gets erased, somebody is transferring all the information into the harvest journal. So by the end of the year, that harvest journal contains all the harvests of the year. And then I put that on a spreadsheet because I like to see where we had holes, you know. So we ran out of tomatoes beginning of August. Why did we run out of tomatoes? You know, we don't want that to happen next year. We had a hole of 2 weeks, we didn't have any lilies, and we don't want that to happen. So I'm able to analyze the year's production by checking out this harvest journal. That's it. It's just that harvest log with a hole punched in it and that string put through there and hung up on that whiteboard. On the cooler. It's got to be right. If you don't make this stuff where it's convenient, it won't happen. Everything's happening too fast, you know. Yeah, write legibly. And then the CSA box packing. We need to be able to go back and look at our CSA analytically and see what we're putting in our boxes and when the stuff was coming off. So you need to keep separate track of what went in your CSA box, because in my newsletter to the CSA, I'll tell them you're getting celebrity tomatoes, you're getting market more cucumbers, but I didn't tell them you're getting 2.5 pounds of tomatoes, that you're getting 5 market more cucumbers. I want that information somewhere because we're adding up value for the CSA boxes, and I want to actually know the quantities that went in. So I have to put that down also in the harvest journal. And that's what it might look like on a given day, where we brought in 5 lugs of strawberries at approximately 5 pounds each, 30 bunches of chervil, 45 bunches of spinach from the hoop house, 25 pounds of salad mix, and the flowers that came in, 12 buckets of glad, 7 buckets of lilies, 5 buckets of azuratum, and then down at the CSA, I want exactly what went in the CSA. If possible, it's nice to be able to track where that item was coming from in the field. You might have, let's say you really want to figure out how much can you make from a kale planting in October until it's finished in April. And then let's say you have a planting of kale in the hoop house, and then you have a spring planting of kale outside. Well, if you don't have any way of distinguishing where the material came from, you'll never figure out how much you made on the kale from the hoop house, because it's all mixed up with the stuff from outside. We're still working on this part, because every harvester has to be able to enter the information, and we haven't gotten there yet. I'm working on that part. Work in progress on location. This is something this probably what inspired me to some of this is going back to the place where I trained at UCSC Santa Cruz. They have 40 interns, 100-member CSA, markets down at the farmer's market, and they have to coordinate all that harvest with all those people. And so they have this huge board that has exactly where the item is, how many they need for the CSA, how many they need for the market cart, who's going to do it, and then when it's checked off, that means somebody has taken that job, and they're going to, so we actually have that also, somebody initials. We set up this type of a thing on a harvest day because some of it's going to be for farmer's market, some of it just has to go in the cooler because it's ready to harvest, some of it's going to be for the CSA, some of it's going to be for a restaurant account, and all that stuff has to be somewhere so that everybody can look at it. I don't want them having to come to find me to ask me these questions because it just slows everything down. I want them, so I'll go and put together a board like this on a harvest day so people know what to go get. Otherwise, you just don't have an efficient system. Time spent. So yeah, then at the end of the year, I can come back on that harvest journal, enter it in on an Excel spreadsheet, harvest by harvest. This takes some time. I should be doing this in the summer. I've never gotten around to doing that in the summer yet. But it's fascinating to see a year's harvest over time because you get some interesting insights into what you want to do better and when you have to plan it to fill up the holes, you know. And having information like this gives you access to information about your profitability that you didn't have before. Let's say if you're in a small operation like we are and you really want to maximize the amount of dollars that you're making by dropping crops that aren't profitable. In the beginning, everybody wants to grow everything and grow everything that they like, and maybe you think asparagus would be a good idea and you want to put in some strawberries, but look, that asparagus yielded $184 per 100 feet of bed, and the kale $1,230-something per 100 feet of bed. That's just from keeping track of the number of bunches that came out. This year we found out that the strawberries, just 3,200 strawberry plants yielded us almost $8,000 worth of strawberries. And if we hadn't had a record of how many quarts came out, we wouldn't have been able to figure that out. And then we also put together spreadsheets. So we have a couple of wholesale accounts, and I like to see how much have we sold. Of course, we have to do this for our taxes to figure out how much total we sold them, but it's also real interesting to figure out what items that they're taking that they always want to take from us, and so we separate it out by item. At the farmer's market, we have a farmer's market journal, also a 3-ring notebook, and we need to know what we've taken to market, and we need to know what didn't sell at market, and we need to know, of course, what we took in, what the commission was, and also we need to know the special orders that were taken at market. So we have a template that we use. I print it on cardstock so it doesn't tear up too easily, and then punch it with a 3-hole punch, put it in the 3-ring binder. And so every time we have this, you know, the date, total receipts, starting cash, net receipts after the commission has been taken out, how much did we pay any employees. We also take our employees to lunch, so how much did the meal cost. The weather will generally affect sales, so it's nice to keep track of the weather. Special orders for today, by having that at the very top of the page, we're less likely to forget somebody's order if we transfer it there before, you know, the night before we're looking at all this stuff for the next day. And then if anybody comes up to me and say, can I order 10 bouquets for 2 weeks from now when I'm having this event, I've got to have someplace very convenient to write it down. I always take down a phone number and their name and exactly what they want. And then I put our town list on there too, what I got to pick up in town. And then if you're smart, and this is hard, this is the hardest part to do, you will have a log of what you've taken to market and what didn't sell and how much you sold it for, because we go back to this. We don't use this format anymore. We use actually a separate sheet that's got a lot more entries on it. But every Friday, we're sitting around at breakfast with our crew figuring out how many bunches we want to go get for market. And so there may be a ton of stuff out there. Are you going to go take a ton to market, or are you going to take what you sold last week, which seemed to be about as much as the market could bear? There's no point in spending the effort in harvesting 50 bunches of something if you're only going to sell 12. So by referring back every time to what we took the previous week and what sold, we start to get this idea of what, and if you never sell more than 5 bunches of purple top turnips, why do you keep growing 50 bunches a week worth, you know? And so this is, but the hardest part to capture, it's one thing to capture the stuff you're taking to market, putting in the truck. It's very hard to capture that information about what's left over at the end, because everybody wants to get loaded up and leave as fast as they can and go to lunch. And so that's where I try to involve other people on the market team to give somebody that special job of doing inventory. This is real important for us for plant sales, where we grow heirloom tomato plants in 4-inch pots and herbs and stuff like that. And I really need to know how many of those things are we actually selling, so we just don't waste our time.
If you don't sell them, do you plant them and grow them out?
Tomatoes?
Whatever.
not the tomatoes, but sometimes the herbs. We really have tried to hone down what we grow to what we'll sell as much as we can. We try to eliminate waste as much as possible because we just don't have big, huge fields to go just throw something out there, and if it makes it, it does, and if it doesn't, no, it doesn't matter. We don't have a situation like that. What I like doing, and you can see because I have all these pictures of the market because I've been taking pictures. And even this summer it's going to be even easier because my brother gave me an iPad for Christmas, and that thing takes awesome pictures, and I can post it directly to Facebook if I want to. And that's been a problem because my little iPhone thing doesn't take very good pictures, but the iPad takes awesome pictures, and within seconds you can show people what you got at market on Facebook. But I like having a photo record of what our market looked like because I like to analyze our display. You know, we're known for having an awesome display at market, and it's because we take time to try to create the most beautiful situation we can, because that's what causes your stuff to sell. Stacking, you know, stacking stuff, keep consolidating and fluffing it up over the course of a market as you develop holes, keep putting in, and that's just basic supermarket knowledge. You know, it works at the farmer's market too. But documenting it for yourself, and then if you have a newsletter, you use all these pictures in your newsletter to attract people to come to market. So how do we make a plan? If you start keeping records like this, I'm going to just show you my basic formula for how I'm making a planting plan for the coming year. So I developed a planning worksheet, and it's an Excel spreadsheet. It's got, in the columns, the first column underneath Dripping Springs crop planning worksheet, those are the items. So they'll be, I tell you what I do, is I take the maps from last year, and the first thing I do is populate this spreadsheet with all the information from those maps. So on the first page, if it says bed A3 planted sunflowers such and such a time, I put it on the spreadsheet because I have a date, I have a column for greenhouse date last year, transplant to the field last year, bed feet last year.
Do you use the same, do you plant in the same area, or do you
We-
rotate the crops?
We rotate. See, it doesn't have, does it have a, it does have a location, but a lot of times I don't pay attention to this location thing. Even though that sounds like a tremendous amount of work, what it does is it gives me a chance to review in kind of a systematic way every item that got grown last year. So what's going to happen is after I've put all the map stuff on here, then you can sort the columns either alphabetically or by date. And so once I've got the thing filled out from last year, I'll sort this first column alphabetically. So you know, when the spinach comes up, there might have been 10 plantings of spinach. All the spinaches will be next to each other. Then I can sort the field planting date, and I'll see the chronological history of those spinaches. What this allows me to do is, like, because our place is made up of this patchwork of crops that are valuable to us, I have to really analyze every single one individually and then put them all together. The gladiolas have to be considered separately from the lilies, from the zinnias, from the tomatoes. And even though you might have to eventually abandon your plan midsummer because of bad weather, you have to have benchmarks that you know you've got to get the fennel in by such and such a date or it's not going to make by October. You've got to get the carrots in. And do you have an idea about how much you want to plant? If you planted 2 times too many tomatoes last year, why would you do it again? Unless you're really expecting another market. So once you've entered the data from last year, you start entering in stuff, well, when do you want, what's your target date in your greenhouse date for your tomatoes this year? When's your target date for your field planting? What's your target amount that you want to plant, and how many plants do you need? If you don't have your plants ready, by the time your field planting date comes around, you're stuck. 2 months later, you can't even catch up. And when you're dealing with a complicated planting like this is, all of those things have to be considered. Now, I have to admit that there's a balance between doing this type of system and having the time to sit down and actually focus on it. The hardest part is actually being able to focus yourself on a sheet of paper, but all this information, if you can just recall the crops and then tweak your plan and add in things where you want to plant, you've got to have some benchmarks of when you think you want to plant and how much, right? Even if you don't know where they're going to go. A lot of times we don't know where the crops are going to go. They're going to get fit in as they can be fit in somewhere in the field. But we know we want another cucumber crop. Like last year we had an awesome cucumber crop that was very productive, made a lot of money, and then nothing for 2 months, and then a late crop. I don't want that to happen again. So I'm putting on my plan that I want another crop 1 month after the first one, about the same size, and by at least getting the plants started at the right time, we'll struggle to get those plants out on time. This making sense? Does anybody do something like this?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Do you keep materials or tractor information in a similar kind of a log, like an equipment log, or for maintenance, or for?
Oh, that's a good idea. I should.
Okay.
My dad would have.
Where you buy your polyvinyl from and what the price is?
Well, let's see. I'll show you how we keep those records. You can highlight these different strips so this is a little easier to look at, but you get the basic picture. You put down your last year's information, you start tweaking everything, putting in target dates and target amounts, and then eventually you can sort the columns by if the target greenhouse date, you can sort that column of target greenhouse dates and you'll come up with a chronological planting plan. And you can just look over your row to see how much you need to plant on that date. What I'm struggling with right now is how do I get this information onto a block calendar? I would rather have it on a block calendar. There actually is a downloadable thing called Win Calendar, W-I-N calendar, and it inserts into your Excel program. But you can't have any blank data or it won't work. So I haven't got it to work yet. But I think it'd be fun to be able to go directly from this and have it populate a calendar for me. Then the hoop houses are done separately because the hoop house is such a valuable space that and there are things that we absolutely want to put in the hoop houses, like early tomatoes and the spinaches and kale and chard and the snapdragons, those lisianthus I was showing you. So this kind of juggling is real important to do on a blank map. So the hoop houses have separate maps. And then from that spreadsheet, you can develop sowing schedules. For instance, this was just copied out. Or you can put it on a block calendar so that the crew knows about it too. Our crew usually likes to know what's coming up for them. Yeah, CSAs require certain type of planning so that you have material. That's why it's a good idea to keep track of what was in your CSA baskets the previous year so you know about when you start to have crops ready. One kind of documentation I started doing this year, because one of our interns liked taking pictures of the CSA basket. He'd take it out of the box after they were packed and put them in this basket on top of a tablecloth, and we took a picture. And eventually I started using those pictures in our CSA newsletter every week, because I just put this picture in the middle of the newsletter, what's in the box this week, and underneath it from clockwise I'd name everything. I had always named everything but never had a picture of all the stuff. And it was pretty effective. There's a book, this one right here, called Crop Planning. These people are in Canada. They have an interesting technique. They plan backwards from what they want to make. So they decide they want to make $80,000. They plan backwards in terms of what kind of vegetables they're going to plant, how many bunches they need to harvest at what price in order to get there. And they have, if you buy this book, they've got templates that you can use that will populate your spreadsheets with planting dates from when you want it. This is an awesome book. I would get it if I were you. I went to a workshop of his last year, but he has a lot of really great techniques for keeping track of your records in the office. For instance, in just general crop planning, we'll have farmers market beets that we need, we'll have CSA beets that we need, we have restaurant beets that we need, and you can figure, I mean, so he's got what, 500 pounds total, $700? He's figuring out, he's putting together a spreadsheet of what the value of his crops are. Okay, this is how we deal with this is a part of record keeping, more financial. Every receipt gets saved. Every receipt goes in a wallet. Every single purchase. We always get the receipts. They go home, they are put on a nail. Eventually they get sorted into the various categories depending on our tax categories. Fertilizer, everything. And they go in folders in a filing cabinet. This is where all of our seed orders are, equipment purchases, anything having to do with the purchases of the farm go into the filing cabinet so that we can access them. I always am using this information to figure out how many flats of what such and such we ordered last year, so I know, because I can't remember that stuff from year to year. Learn how to use QuickBooks. It's not that hard. Just hard to sit down and do it. Yes, and so we eventually, at the end of the year, we just finished doing these spreadsheets for our income for the past year, because our taxes will be due, and so how about any questions? Oh, one thing to take a look at in Richard Wiswell's Organic Farmer's Business Handbook is the crop budgets that he did. So we have friends in the SOG network now who are going around giving this Growing Farm Profits workshop. And that is where you take a look at the profitability of all of your different crops. And it includes, what you harvested, how much it sold for, what your labor time in was, what your costs were in terms of transplants and everything. It's quite a project to take any one crop and develop a crop budget, but Richard did it. He's that type of person, and it's just fascinating to look at the difference in value of 1/10 acre quantities. Look at the value of 1/10 of an acre of broccoli, $116 compared to $3,500 for basil. Of course, you maybe can't sell that much basil. But as Ellen likes to say, just because you can sell something doesn't mean you're making any money. People will buy broccoli until the cows come home at the market, and nobody makes money on it. Very few people make any money on it. Or sweet corn. Yeah.
Did I hear you correctly earlier say that on 4 acres, your net is 170?
Gross.
I mean,
Gross.
right, your gross.
Gross.
To me, that sounds not enough for the amount of work you're putting into it and the amount of labor you're having to pay and the outlay of equipment and materials. Does anybody else think that sounds light?
A reality check here is, what is your motivation in life? I mean, I think for him,
Well, right, I agree with that, but,
So
I'm from a contracting background, so, all of the labor becomes a real, and you have a lot of turnover, and I'm just wondering
Okay, so
how much you pay
yeah,
and what your insurance is.
the
and
bottom
all
line
that
would
kind of
look a
stuff.
lot worse if we were hiring everybody at $10 an hour.
And he said interns, remember the word interns,
Right.
means work without pay.
No, they don't work without pay. We pay those interns, the inexperienced ones get about $650 a month plus room and board. The experienced ones get $1,000 a month plus room and board.
Okay.
So all their meals are covered, all their housing is covered.
And you have no problem filling those slots?
We haven't had because we have an interesting situation. And we have housing. And we have facilities. You know, like this year we're building a new intern house. But we live in a really rural, isolated situation. And that's difficult to get people in. It would be really hard to get anybody to drive in there as far as it would take to come in there. Most of our market is in an hour away, and most of the people who would want to work for us are an hour away. But we have other friends who are basically grossing similar amounts on that acreage that sell at markets in North Carolina where they get somewhat more for their product, like in the Carbo market. And they hire at $9 an hour, and they have 6 employees. So it's very hard to compare farming with other jobs.
$10 for no production.
You know, we have, that depends on what kind of, we have a value that we can give to our interns that is not money. And so there are a lot of farms that can use that type of situation, but there are a lot of families that don't want to deal with that either. So, anybody else? I think we're going to close up. Appreciate you coming.